Broadcasting live from the shattered remains of the Dark Universe, this is Pop Culture Reference, your one-stop reference for all things pop culture. I'm one of your hosts, Garrett Strother.
I'm one of your other hosts, Seamus Connolly.
Hi, hello, I'm here again, Ricardo.
What's going on, gentlemen?
Happy October, Seamus.
Happy October to all. It is the time of being flooded with skeletons and ghosts, so I'm pretty happy.
We're going to have a pretty spooky-oriented show for you today. We're going to kick off some of our Halloween-oriented content with our main segment, and we're even going to have a little Halloween pop culture reference segment for you today. So, shall we get right into news?
Let's do it.
Let's jump into it. First up, we're going to be looking at a short little trailer that dropped a couple weeks ago for Lupin III the First, the official English dub.
Ricardo, why don't you give us your little synopsis of what this movie's about? Because I'd never heard of it, and I don't think Seamus had either before you sent us the link.
Before we watched this trailer just a little bit ago, I was completely unaware.
I'll read straight off the YouTube description. The iconic gentleman thief, Lupin III, returns in an action-packed, continent-spanning adventure, as Lupin III and his colorful underworld companions race to uncover the secrets of the mysterious Bresson Diary, before it falls into the hands of the dark cabal that will stop at nothing to resurrect the Third Reich.
Now that ending of that synopsis, I didn't see that one coming, really. The Third Reich is involved. I've never heard of the anime that this is based on either, so, I mean, I'm pretty interested.
It sounds a little The Mummy, it sounds a little Uncharted, it sounds a little Kingsman. I'm in for it. It was a pretty action-packed trailer. It looked fun to me.
Yeah, it looks like just a big old grand adventure, and the animation style, it's got like CG mixed with the classic, more stylized squash and stretch. I just like looking at it, dude.
I was saying this before, I had just finished the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it gave me almost it's like super clean and nice animation, still very influenced by Japanese anime style, but God, I have to agree, it just visually looks appealing. It was only like a very, very short trailer that got us pretty interested.
Yeah, Lupin as like a IP has been around since like maybe the 70s.
No kidding, I can't believe I've never heard of it.
Yeah, fun fact, a Lupin movie was actually Hayao Miyazaki's directorial debut. What was it called?
Oh, wow.
The Castle of Caligristo.
Right on, well, we'll keep an eye on this one for, when is it supposed to come out?
I don't believe there's a release date yet, but it came out in its original language, I think maybe last year, but this is like the official English dub for all our English-speaking listeners.
So yeah, we'll definitely check that out. I'm excited to learn more about Lupin and his colorful friends.
Coming up next on news, we have a whole docket of Disney news.
All of this was in with like the same 24 to 36 hour period. As many of you have probably heard, citing business losses from COVID-19, Disney announced that they will be letting go 28,000 of their employees across the world. And in the same breath, also announced that all Disney executives will be going back to getting paid their pre-COVID rates before salary cuts.
What a terrible pair of news. Like, the livelihoods that are created in these Disney parks, these actors and these people that dedicate so much of their lives to, like, a career at Disney are getting totally just cut loose, and then it's frustrating indeed.
Haven't their last several movies made over $1 billion? It's not like they don't have the money.
The thing that has to be kept in mind when we're talking about Disney as a whole is we're talking about the Disney conglomerate. So we're not just talking about the stuff that we think about when we think about Disney. So your theme parks and your major studios, Marvel, Pixar, Disney. We're also talking about ESPN.
Oh yeah, National Geographic.
And even non-strictly entertainment-based companies that Disney just owns. We're not only looking at like entertainment industry based job losses, we're looking at Disney as a whole has its hands in a whole lot of pies. So this is spread out over a pretty big dominion, but it's just very shocking to me that they would release these two pieces of news so close together. I'm assuming some of the people being laid off are still people that have been kept on after the Fox merger that are redundancies within the two companies. That is not an excuse, but it is something that I'm assuming is kind of being folded in with all of this COVID purging.
You know, at first I had actually read something that made me believe that it was a lot more Disney park and Disney entertainment related. But keeping that perspective of they do have all of these Fox holdovers and they do own so much of so much that it would kind of make sense that their downsizing would impact that amount of people. Then again, as you're saying, the release of the news between the layoffs and the executives' pay raises it's hard to not think of that as directly correlated of, oh, let's lay off these people in these hard times so that our fat cats can continue to be the way that they are. It's a hard pill to swallow.
And then also, that same day, they announced that they're going to be making a sequel to the quote-unquote live-action Lion King, helmed by Moonlight director Barry Jenkins. So that's another $200 million movie that they're starting production on when they're already sitting on all these other movies. I know that there's a lot going on behind the scenes of these mega corporations, but the fact that their PR team wasn't smart enough to spread out this news a little bit, plus the fact that we already have Lion King 2 Simba's Pride, we can watch that on Disney+.
I was gonna ask, is it a straight up, not quite live action remake of the actual Lion King 2?
No, Barry Jenkins has said on Twitter that it's going to be a completely new story. But I think that's going to be even more infuriating in some ways than the first movie, because at least with the first Lion King, I can just go watch the original Lion King and get all the emotions and all of the character beats out of that story that they aren't able to tell with these weird, stiff, hyper-realistic animated puppets.
Yeah, man, I am not about this. If they're not doing Lion King 1.5, I don't want to hear it.
See, I would even be more in for that. I remember loving Lion King 1.5, but like you said, Garrett, the only thing people are really excited for in these remakes, as far as I've been seeing, is the huge draw from the originals that people grew up with. If this is a lot like maybe how they diverted from Mulan's original cartoon version as they did with the new version now. Obviously, there were a ton of other factors involved with Mulan, but even content-wise, I heard a lot of people were disappointed, so...
Disney is not batting 1,000 right now. I am very happy with them for delaying so much of their theatrical releases, but I think they're making a lot of missteps in the public eye right now.
They cast Miss Marvel for her upcoming movie.
Her upcoming Disney Plus series, I think.
Oh, sorry.
It's going to be a newcomer, 18-year-old Canadian actress Aman Vellani. I don't know where they found her. I'm assuming it was some kind of open casting call. But just like a lot of this other Disney Plus Marvel news, I'm excited to see what they do with it.
Yeah, they're going into some very uncharted territories for me in terms of, I would say I'm a pretty decent Marvel fan, but, a lot of the stuff that they're casting and that I'm getting excited for is stuff that I have, less than base knowledge for, so I'm excited to have fun with these characters.
I know Miss Marvel is somehow related to Captain Marvel.
I was gonna ask.
I know she's Middle Eastern. Mm-hmm. And I know she's got those big hands that look really stupid, and I don't know how they're going to translate to live action.
Wait, she's got big hands?
I think she's got, Mr. Fantastic stretchy powers, but she makes her hands all big.
That's dope. I'm into it.
I think she's in the new Avengers game, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
the one that's
yes, she
not
is.
Good.
The one that's awful, yeah.
But we also have other way more surprising Marvel casting news.
I cannot even believe it.
That Jamie Foxx, widely known exclusively for his role as Electro in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, is returning as Electro for the Marvel Cinematic Universe Tom Holland Spider-Man 3.
We're in the Spider-Verse, aren't we, boys? We're just in the middle of nonsense. Sam Raimi directed, bringing in the Raimi-verse. We're bringing in the Andrew Garfield-verse, all wrapping it up into a movie that could pertain further into multiverse stuff than we are even anticipating. It's gonna be the weirdest. I'm very excited.
Seamus, I do think it is a real possibility that Multiverse of Madness could be tying into this decision, but I also think that would mean that Marvel is relying on people having seen Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Have you guys not seen The Amazing Spider-Man 2?
I have not seen The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I'm sorry to say. I'm also assuming that if it isn't a multiverse thing, I'm assuming it's going to be like comics Electro not the weird blue.
I hope so, dude.
Jamie Foxx straight up came out and confirmed. He said, yeah, I'm not going to be blue this time around.
Yes, thank God.
So then not a multiverse thing, which is both good and bad. I'm assuming we'll get some kind of Tobey Maguire thing in Multiverse of Madness, which we've talked about before.
We better, man. I'll lose myself.
It's a whole different thing. Why would you bring him back unless you're going to do the whole multiverse thing? You could get anybody to do this role.
They also brought back, not that J.K. Simmons isn't perfect casting, because he is, but they brought back J.K. Simmons to be J. Jonah Jameson. So it seems like with the Spider-Man stuff, maybe Sony is pushing them to bring back people that were in the previous Sony Spider-Man stuff. And I remember a few months ago when we broke down the Morbius trailer, we talked about how behind Morbius, there's a mural where it's Spider-Man and it says murderer written over it, but it's not the Tom Holland Spider-Man, it's the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man.
Oh my, I didn't even realize that was the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man in that trailer.
So, even though it's supposed to be set in, like, the MCU adjacent Sony-verse, which is maybe MCU, because, you know, you see Vulture in that trailer.
Yeah, Sony can corner the, do the PlayStation stuff. You're doing well enough there. It's so tiring to have to keep track of what is and isn't, and what is halfway in what universe. It's the worst.
Where's Paul
We'll
Giamatti?
see.
Bring him back.
I was just about to ask. Paul Giamatti is the Rhino for 45 seconds in that movie, and he's great.
For somebody who hasn't seen The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I, of course, know about the infamous Rhino cliffhanger.
Oh, it's like the Rocky 3 freeze frame ending, but stupid. It's the worst.
Because the Rocky 3 freeze frame ending isn't stupid, Seamus.
You better watch your mouth, Strother.
Should we talk about, my wife?
My wife.
Oh, bad Borat impressions are back on the menu, boys. We're doing it for the next 10 years.
It always comes back around.
I never saw the original Borat.
Neither have I, Seamus.
I only know it as a cultural touchstone.
So none of us have seen Borat then.
Wow, really? Did you guys watch the trailer for the new one?
Yeah.
It
looks good.
So good. It looks like, how Eric Andre did his own movie of Man on the Street stuff. It's like that of the specifically political angle, which is just the best.
It's a time that makes a lot of sense to bring Borat back.
God. Is this gonna work, though? Because part of the whole thing with Borat is that they don't know it's Sacha Baron Cohen. But now everybody knows my wife, so is that gonna...
In the trailer, there are a very wide range of disguises that are being used.
Yes.
So I think it's going to be a lot more disguises than just the Borat.
It's probably going to be a little bit more like that Showtime show that he had.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't even know he had a show.
He was able to disguise himself well enough that he got to talk to, like,
yes.
real political people. I think he
It was like
Lindsey
We
Graham
Are America or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Very prominent politicians acting honestly terrible. It's,
So I'll be interested. It's dropping October 23rd on Amazon Prime.
I'm gonna have myself a double feature of the original and this new one.
I was gonna say, we gotta catch up before we get in there, get the lore of this weird character.
Who is his
we'll
wife?
cover it.
I don't know.
Our last bit of news for today is, I think, something that we all saw coming and even talked about on the show the last couple weeks.
I think you straight up made a joke, Garrett.
It is official. James Bond 007 No Time to Die has been officially delayed. It's no longer coming out in November. It will be coming out April 2nd, 2021, almost a full year after it was originally supposed to come out.
I want to see this movie. I'd rather see it in a theater. I'd rather see it in a healthy theater.
Yeah.
Delay it. It'll give us time to, recap. I've never done the whole Bond gauntlet from beginning to end, but, maybe this is a sign giving us extra time to go do the whole thing.
So that means the next major theatrical release, as planned, is Death on the Nile on December 18th. So basically, for the rest of 2020, there is nothing coming out in theaters.
Wow. This is a weird time to be a movie podcast, huh, boys? As we always say when we hear about these delays pretty much weekly, is that we're generally, it's a positive thing. We don't want people getting sick. We would rather see movies in the way we want to see them. Hopefully, this giant slate of movies getting pushed won't get pushed further. These studios are just going to, crash into themselves with release dates at a certain point, so they're going to have to do something.
And we'll see what happens with movie theaters. We'll keep you guys updated on that because Are major chains like AMC and Regal and Cinemark gonna stay open if there's no new movies coming out? Is it worth it? Because I understand they don't make a lot of money off of showing old movies. We'll have to keep updated. So I think we're actually gonna skip pop culture catch-up this week. We've pretty much exhausted the list of big pop cultural touchstones that happened while we were off the air that I can think of. If there's anything that happened during our hiatus that you guys missed and really wanted us to touch on, go ahead and tweet us at PCR_podcast or email the podcast at popculturereferencepod@gmail.com. Let us know if there's something you want to talk about. We'll talk about it for next week's pop culture catch-up. Let's go ahead and jump into our main segment, Ricardo.
Listen, you're getting your freedom back, okay? Don't let them haunt you.
Hello? I'm scared.
You don't have to be scared of him anymore.
He was a sociopath, completely in control of everything. He said that wherever I went, he would find me, walk right up to me, and I wouldn't be able to see him.
The Invisible Man.
Garrett, actually, I think it was last week, this was your Save the Rec Center.
It was. With it being on HBO and we needed a Halloween-themed film to kick off October, I thought, what better than to pick a new release that I knew you guys hadn't seen and I wanted to chat with you guys about.
Man, what a great pick, Garrett. Right off the bat, my feelings about this movie are very positive.
Same here, man.
I don't know.
I really enjoyed this.
I made jokes, I think, about Abbott and Costello and the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen when you brought up The Invisible Man, but holy crap, I really didn't know what I was getting into. You buried the lead on what this movie was gonna be in a lot of ways, and I'm very glad you did.
Ricardo, you have any more detailed thoughts? I'm very curious. I'm so excited to hear you guys talk about it.
I really like this new spin they put on this really old story. It makes it feel so fresh, and I was really engaged with the suspense they were doing. I love their use of the camera and the use of negative space.
Oh my god, yes.
To make you feel like he's always there. Like, you always have that sense like he's watching.
It's a great way to instill those feelings when they do those slow, sweeping shots of just, empty rooms, and you're, trying to look at every little detail to see if, is that curtain moving a little bit? Is this small reflection changing at all? It had me on the edge of my seat. As cliche as that is, it was just really good.
And it's crazy to think about that that's all in the directing and the performances, because, you guys will appreciate this also as people that have made films. It's a very simple way to execute that. There's some big effects in this movie that we'll get into a little bit later, but for the most part, the tension from this comes from just really good, believable performances, mostly from Elizabeth Moss, and very well-timed, intentional pacing from everybody behind the scenes. It's a real achievement.
Yeah, I think that's partly due to the whole Blumhouse method of not giving the people any money.
Yeah.
You have, the bare minimum, make it work.
It drives ingenuity, that's for sure, and better horror movies often are the ones with the lower budgets.
Yeah, you can see that in a lot of classic horror work. Usually it's not literally an invisible entity, but it's such that it might as well be. It's the suspense of not seeing, not knowing. It's like the Jaws method. There is a good amount of POV shots that we got to see, from behind corners, a lot of, really subtle, very great camera work that it made me think about Black Christmas, Jaws, a lot of those classics that are specifically made around the not knowing stuff.
It made me think also about the way some hallways are shot. There's a little bit of that Shining element where you just keep going around corners and not knowing what you're going to see.
I very much felt that watching it last night.
For anyone unfamiliar, Garrett, you want to give us a very quick kind of synopsis of this new version of The Invisible Man?
Yeah, so basically, The Invisible Man is a very new, pretty much original interpretation of the story, where the main character is a woman named Cecilia who is trapped in a controlling, seemingly emotionally abusive relationship that she is able to escape from, only to realize slowly that he has found some way to become invisible to continue being in her life. And so I think that's all I really want to say without giving too much away, because there's so many twists and turns throughout the film that I don't want to spoil the experience of watching this film for anybody who hasn't seen it.
Yeah, that is a pretty great synopsis for sure. It's been a very, very long time since I've read the original Invisible Man, but from what I remember, it's like the biggest departure from what that character is supposed to be, right?
I mean, there is some manipulative elements to the original character, but he's still more of a positive character throughout that story as opposed to this. He is
a
very
villain.
Clearly the antagonist, yeah. I also really enjoyed the idea of, if there was this Invisible Man,
yes,
the gaslighting aspect of who would believe you and how would you actually deal with knowing that somebody could be around you all the time, and the more psychological elements that this film brings to that story. It makes it feel really fresh and it makes it feel really relevant.
Yeah, that's what really twisted up my stomach while I was watching the Invisible Man just kind of doing like subtle things to kind of just turn everyone in her life against her.
And that is a huge kind of subplot of everything that happens in this movie, is that it is almost as much about the relationship and the abuse that she experienced. They're using a lot of this Invisible Man elements to illustrate a lot of what these kinds of relationships can do. It is like a disconnect them from friends, disconnect them from family, sow deceit in a lot of personal relationships that it's hard to explain away that, oh, it was this other person, it wasn't me being myself.
Yeah, it's like you said, Seamus, all the best horror films are about something bigger than just a supernatural threat. And this is a very well-told, very well-acted, interesting take on real abusive and manipulative relationships. And I've read about how a lot of people that have gone through these kind of relationships found it really difficult to watch this movie because of how accurately and carefully it portrays that kind of twisted relationship.
You guys want to talk some spoilers?
Final thoughts, it's just a really spectacular film, really well made, it's really well acted, it's really suspenseful. My parents, who do not like horror or thriller movies, both really, really, really enjoyed it. So I think even if you're a little bit hesitant to jump into something that's a little bit more intense, it's worth it for just how good it is.
I agree entirely. If you have HBO and you haven't seen it, I would entirely recommend it to no end. It is one of the better horror/thriller, more intense films that I've seen that have come out recently. It's just, like you said, the performances, fantastic. The effects that go with so many of the interesting ways they want to play with invisibility is fantastic. It's just, I couldn't recommend it more as our first spooky October pick.
Yeah, definitely worth the watch. It's October. Get into that spooky mood.
All right, let's talk some spoilers, guys. This is the official spoiler warning.
And I want to emphasize, like you said, Garrett, this is a very important film to go along the ride with. It's not worth it to dip your toe in, learn all the details that are going to kind of screw with the twists and turns that you were referencing, because, oh boy, what a lot of twists and turns.
You want to talk about the suit? I really like the design of the suit.
Yes.
It's freaky. That is for sure.
Absolutely freaky, and just at its core, I'm going to struggle to remember again, the original Invisible Man is like a potion? It's like a...
Yeah.
What
it's
is
like
it that
weird
turns him
alchemy.
invisible?
It's not science. It's pseudoscience.
It's so much crazier to see this as like a sci-fi concept of, what do they call it?
In this version, the Invisible Man is Elon Musk, basically.
Yeah, he's a crazy optical camouflage inventor, is how they set him up.
I'm sorry, Seamus. He is a world leader in the field of optics.
Excuse me.
You should know that, because they say it again and again.
She says that in the scene where they go to
The lawyer, his brother,
the lawyer's
right?
office. Yeah.
I will
And
say, at that
in
scene,
that-
I did kind of laugh out loud, just because when she's like, and he turned himself invisible. There's just a complete straight face, like, come, you gotta know how that sounds, coming out of your mouth.
I mean, there definitely is some comedy in this movie.
Yes, the way that they sprinkled in these great comedic moments broke this tension that, like we were referencing before, it is a tense film just based on the not knowingness of so much of it. And there's a couple moments, like in the asylum escape, there's weirdly enough a couple funny moments by the Invisible Man. There's another really goofy part that I'm struggling to remember now that I laughed out loud at.
Well, the friend and the daughter that she's staying with are both funny.
Yeah, totally.
I loved them. I thought I just enjoyed their dynamic.
They're
There was
both
a little point that bothered me when the Invisible Man punches a little girl in the face.
Oh yeah, he clocks that girl. Like, the way that he's doing this, like, strategy of, like, subtle this. I'm gonna write an email from her account to the sister, or I'm gonna, make her look crazy on the security camera. He just goes for it. He just knuckle sandwiches this girl in the mouth.
It's so shocking because of that slow burn. Like you said, it's such little things that he's doing that when he gets physical with another person, it's really shocking. And it's because he's been sowing these seeds to make them believe that she's possibly unhinged enough to actually harm this girl who's trying to help her.
Yeah. I have a little bit of a nitpick for that bit, in that they were like 2 feet apart from each other and she didn't move.
I mean, Ricardo, if you were in that situation, would you find it easier to believe, oh, there's an invisible guy punching me, or I just didn't see her fist coming?
Yeah,
I guess that
my
does
girlfriend...
make more logical sense. But also that means that Elizabeth Moss is like really fast.
I don't know. You get sucker punched in the face, and you're pretty disoriented for a little bit. Like, especially...
Like poor Rick Moranis.
Oh, Rick Moranis! That video
News
made me
broke
so
my
sad.
heart, man.
Oh, God.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail us.
No. That was worth bringing up. God bless you, Rick Moranis. Please get better. If we're going to talk about Invisible Man violence out of nowhere...
Oh,
The restaurant?
You mean the most shocking scene in this movie?
I like a jaw on the floor. It was so... At dinner, finally, Elizabeth Moss is getting through to her sister about the technology behind this insane person.
A real quick tangent. I did not care for her sister, man. Especially in that scene where she's just a complete ass to this waiter for no reason.
Yeah, that's what was funny. The waiter. I loved the waiter bit.
Yes,
that was hilarious.
The waiter was really funny. That's the thing. The waiter is the key to that scene because you're in this public place. It's a little funny. You are...
totally disarmed in that moment.
Yes.
Well, you think you're safe, but no one is safe from the Invisible Man. He's invisible. He just goes up. It's like a reverse shot conversation with Elizabeth Moss and her sister. And it goes, sister, Elizabeth Moss, back to sister, back to Elizabeth Moss, and then it's a floating butcher knife over her shoulder, and then a quick swipe across the sister's throat for a very public murder. Then, what I can only assume is him placing and holding the knife in her fist. She might have been in shock, and she was just holding it on her own, but man, what a way to look guilty as hell, huh?
And again, it's using simple filmmaking language to give the audience a shock. You were talking about the simplicity of that shot, reverse shot, and the brilliance of that moment is in the second where you see the knife, but before you fully make it through.
Yes, exactly. That's what it
means.
is.
And then your stomach drops.
Yeah, it's about as
and then it
fast as
happens.
they were cutting back and forth to each other anyways, so you're like completely in this rhythm of this scene, and then it's
the
just
knife is like in
dropped on
your
you.
periphery. So you're like, hold, is that a knife? And then just bam.
So insane. So insane.
I was alone in my room and I like jumped.
Yeah, dude, I got a little loud at like 1 a.m. watching this movie.
My parents and I watched it. I said to my mom, I was like, this is probably going to be a dark movie. Can you reach behind you and turn off the light? And my dad, like, snuggled up with his blanket up under his chin.
Was your dad okay after that? It gets only crazier from there.
My dad was fine. before he died. He gives it a rousing endorsement.
Good.
So even my dad, who is probably the person that likes horror movies the least out of anyone I've ever met,
That's a
likes
good
this
endorsement
movie.
then. I wasn't sure if I was going to recommend this to my folks, because my dad isn't the most into horrific imagery and the like. But if your dad is giving it that endorsement, maybe I should send it on my parents' way.
This movie was definitely more violent than I expected it to be, in terms of, like, people getting their throats slit.
There's a lot of that going on in this movie.
And I touched on it before, the Sarah Connor Terminator 2 asylum escape that happens after she is almost naturally accused of murdering her sister in public.
Of course, like, the brilliance of it is that there's no escape. Like, she did not do anything wrong. She could not have gotten out of that situation.
Exactly. It's messed up. But in terms of carnage, when the Invisible Man is, like, storming the asylum, just executing guards that cannot see him, who are confused and dead, one after another, it's crazy. It's so insane.
Dude, when he makes that guy shoot himself in the kneecap...
Yeah, dude. Oh my god. Is that the guy he screws with and pretends to shoot and then shoots anyway?
No, that's another guy. But that's another piece of great filmmaking where you're tense because you're like, oh, I don't want him to shoot this guy in the head. And you're also seeing the confusion of the guard and the fear of the guard. But you're also seeing how manipulative and terrible this character is, that he's not just doing this because he wants to get to Elizabeth Moss. He's enjoying the pain that he's causing all of these people that he doesn't even know.
I totally agree with what you're saying, and I think we actually don't get a ton of character. Obviously, he's the Invisible Man. A lot of what he's doing is silent and not seen, but we get this attitude of this abuser that we're supposed to be, like, fearful of for the whole movie, and we get to see the joy of his... I took that scene as, like, he loves the power that he's feeling, having complete control over the situation, being invisible, which is, like, you know, textbook abusive.
Yeah, like they said in the movie, like,
behavior.
he's a narcissist, he's a sociopath.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
his glee of... Because he, like, chuckles in that moment. He, like, pretends to shoot the guy. He strolls off. That is one of the only distinct parts where he is in the suit doing what he's doing, and we get to have his personality shine a little bit through the invisible suit.
When did you guys figure out that the brother was in on it?
The brother was a scumbag from the beginning. Like, he did his whole speech about, like, I hated him too, but I sensed something behind that. Because I didn't quite trust him entirely, but I didn't know he was, like, fully in on what was happening, you know?
It's such a good reveal that he is in the suit because they only give you any clue that there was ever two people in the scene immediately before you find out. Because when he is in the daughter's bedroom and gets maced...
Right.
He falls to the ground, she runs out the door, and then there's somebody else in the hallway that stops her.
Oh, dude. That has just rocked me. That's crazy.
And so they just give you a little bit, a little
just
hint
enough
that
in a
maybe
moment of
something's not in the
chaos
scene.
to just sail over your head like it wasn't even supposed to be. When that happened, I was just like, oh, he got up and he ran to the hall and, like, grabbed her from behind or something. But it makes so much more sense that is the final clue. Because, yeah, I guess that is the part where it finally all comes to a head, mostly.
And then we, of course, get the great closing scene where she comes to the actual boyfriend's house to stage his suicide.
Yeah, man. I mean, there's kind of a little thing about, like, the friend who she's been staying with, the father of the girl who got punched. He's been a cop involved in this stuff going on from the beginning, and he's, like, gonna help her stage a sting and, like, get the evidence they need that he was actually the one. But we get a pretty cold-blooded, you accused me all along, you owe me a freebie of letting me murder this man and being my backup. Because, you know, she packs away her own invisible suit from this man's lab. And I got, obviously, any kind of sequel or connected dark universe would be an absolute garbage fire. But thinking about a more virtuous or moralistic invisible entity that wasn't quite a serial killing abusive boyfriend is interesting to me.
I'd watch a sequel to this movie. I don't want a dark universe out of this movie, but I think a sequel to this movie sounds awesome.
Yeah, a little flip side reverse to what the Invisible Man was representing as, like, a total monster in this movie.
My one gripe with this movie is that at the very beginning when she's sneaking out of the house, which itself is just so
Oh,
tense
totally.
and well done. When she takes off Zeus the dog's electric collar, and we focus on the electric collar, and she puts it on the ground, I was really hoping that later in the movie we were going to be at the house again, and she was going to use the electric collar to short out the suit.
That's what I was thinking too. It was going to be a way to track him, or like you said, zap the suit if he was making any kind of noise, or I don't know. They genuinely focused on it at the beginning and kind of at the ending. It was also in the bag with the suit as she's walking out of the house. I don't know. Maybe it was more visual metaphor for the controlling nature of this dude, but
I'm assuming that's what it is.
They made it seem like it was going to come back bigger.
I was hoping that was a setup. But I love the fact that she, really, she goes back for Zeus. She leaves with him at the end.
Totally. She has a couple things she needs to do there, but I am very glad to see that the dog made it out in the end.
It works. It's so good, and even though it leaves room for a sequel, it doesn't cut out plot points so that it can leave room for a sequel. It is a complete, self-contained, really well-told story that also has room for more to happen.
Fantastic film. I couldn't recommend it more to anybody that asks.
Well, I'm really glad you guys liked it, and I'm glad we got to talk about it.
Yeah, thank you, Garrett. If it wasn't for you bringing this one to the table, this would have sailed right by me, and I'm glad that I got to give it a shot.
All right, should we move on, boys?
Let's do it.
Seamus, Ricardo, where's Riley?
I'm going to assume on a cross-country road trip to find a long-lost relative in Arizona.
I was going to say standing right behind you, Garrett, but I really can't tell. Riley is using his job as a sandwich maker to cover up the fact that he is an optical camouflage specialist, or whatever they called it in the movie.
He is a world leader in the field of optics, Seamus.
I think Riley is a world leader in the field of optics.
If being a world leader in the field of optics gets you into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, that would make sense, because Riley DeLuca is in Cleveland,
Oh,
Ohio.
damn, I'm actually kind of jealous. I love Cleveland. Cleveland, what up? Represent.
I was kind of right.
Ricardo, you were in the wrong direction, but
Yeah, it counts. I'll give him points.
So he's visiting his friend Tyler.
Tyler, please listen to the podcast.
Tyler,
Promote
what are
us.
your thoughts on Elizabeth Moss? We never ask, where's Tyler, I'm getting sick of this, where's Riley?
We always ask, where's Riley? Never how's Riley.
Now it's time for our pop culture reference of the episode. And we're going to be tying it right in with our main segment by talking about the history of Universal monster films. Back in the infancy of the studio system, the different studios kind of had different specialties that they focused on in the 30s and 40s. Warner Brothers made a lot of gangster films, RKO made these big sweeping melodramas and romances, and Universal was largely known for making monster and horror films. So you had these titans of acting: Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney Jr., Bela Lugosi. I think most people are familiar, at least through the cultural zeitgeist, with things like Frankenstein, The Wolfman, the original Mummy, not, the Brendan Fraser Mummy, which in turn is a Universal movie, the Brendan Fraser Mummy. But Universal really made a name making these interconnected monster movies, and they did eventually tie in with Abbott and Costello, as Ricardo and Seamus have repeatedly alluded to. Fast forward, you all probably remember the Tom Cruise Mummy movie came out, and they've also attempted to do this with other films. Universal is very interested in the current heyday of cinematic universes in bringing back what they call the dark universe. So all of these old monster movies that used to be interconnected, that were big hits for them in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, they now are really trying to revive and turn into a viable contemporary cinematic universe, which did not work for Dracula Untold, did not work for the Tom Cruise Mummy.
There have been so many false starts to the dark universe. They've always retroactively. No, we start here, guys. Check, we have it all planned out. I swear.
Don't forget. And so then they gave us The Invisible Man, which is by far the best Universal monster movie to come out in decades. And it finally isn't trying to kickstart a dark universe. Though, I would watch more stuff like this. Definitely.
Yeah, if it was on the caliber of The Invisible Man originally, this dark universe maybe would have gone differently, but for those of you who did, for some reason, see the Tom Cruise Mummy that came out just a few years ago, you might understand why this universe kind of got taken away.
They were so ahead of themselves. They had a whole cast list of like big name A-listers, like Johnny Depp, Javier Bardem, and just the whole thing imploded.
Johnny Depp was supposed to be the...
Oh yeah,
villain,
I do
right?
actually remember that.
Yeah, he was.
Well, that, a very different context now based on what we've since learned about Johnny Depp and what we've since learned about the new take on the Invisible Man.
Oh, jeez, Louise.
Universal has a very rich history of monster films. If you're interested in checking out some of those older Universal horror films, most of them are on Peacock, and a lot of them are even free, on the free tier of Peacock. So, I highly recommend them. They're a good time.
Yeah, they're obviously very iconic, the old Universal. It's like literally every, I guess you could call it every pop culture reference that has gone back and drawn from Frankenstein, Dracula, the Mummy. A lot of that comes from those 40s versions of these creatures that were made by Universal. Very much the like big green blockhead Frankenstein. Not only do these influence every monster film since, they're in and of themselves very interesting and entertaining to watch.
That's a rich enough history that it wouldn't surprise me if we dipped back into these for future pop culture references when talking about something more specific, because there is so much to unpack.
Yeah, geez. And, you know, in 10 years, when Universal tries to do the Dark Universe again, we'll just be right back where we started.
What would you have done if at the end of The Invisible Man, Russell Crowe showed up, like, for no reason? Their Nick Fury for their Dark Universe was supposed to be Russell Crowe's Jekyll and Hyde.
Oh my god, I didn't realize that.
This dumb organization.
Ricardo, I don't think you understand. They had vampire teeth in a jar. How did you not get excited about that?
Oh, jeez.
Teeth in a jar and a severed hand, also in a jar.
Get out of here, Universal.
I think you mean the Jark universe?
I hope I hope this episode gets cut.
You guys want
Let's
to save the rec
center? Let's do it.
In watching The Invisible Man last night, I realized that the actor who plays Adrian, who is the abusive boyfriend and titular Invisible Man, is actually played by Oliver Jackson Cohen, who is a very good young actor, and I recognized him from a different Halloween favorite of mine. A couple years ago, Netflix dropped The Haunting of Hill House, which he plays one of the prominent characters in this horror story based on a short book. The classic family moves into a very large and old house, and, you know, something just ain't right about it. And for what it was, I didn't realize how absolutely horrifying it would be as a miniseries. And just seeing his performance last night in The Invisible Man and remembering his great performance in The Haunting of Hill House got me right back in the mood for it, especially considering that the same team are coming back in a few weeks for The Haunting of Bly Manor, which is going to be the anthology sequel to the first season. So I really highly recommend The Haunting of Hill House. Absolutely terrifying, really good writing, you know, perfect for the time that it is right now, perfect for October.
What you got, Ricardo?
On the flip side of that, I'm going to recommend something a little lighter. We very briefly mentioned Eric Andre while we were talking, and that reminded me of his Bad Trip movie, which I saw like a couple months ago, and it is some of the hardest I have laughed at a movie in a long time. And if you're a fan of Eric Andre and like his show or his stand-up or whatever, this is a movie for you. You're going to love it. It's very similar to like that Jackass movie that came out a few years ago, Bad Grandpa, in that it is like a prank kind of movie, but there is like a storyline that ties the whole thing together, where him and little Rel Howard go on like this cross-country road trip so Eric Andre can go confess his feelings to some woman, but none of that's important. It's just like a framing device. Tiffany Haddish is also really funny as like this ex-con who escapes from prison, who's trying to track them down because she's Little Rel Howard's sister and they stole her car in order to do this road trip.
That sounds hilarious.
Amazing.
It's essentially like the on-the-street bits from the Eric Andre show if they were their own movie, and I loved it so much. My stomach hurt from laughing.
Definitely got to check it out.
All right, and I'm going to recommend, since it is October, this is something that's a little seasonally appropriate but not too scary. The 1999 Brendan Fraser classic, The Mummy.
Oh my god, yeah, dude.
one of my favorite films from when I was a kid. I still love it. I know the other 2/3 of this podcast also adore it. It's just a really fun, swashbuckling adventure. You know, it's a classic Universal horror film meets Indiana Jones.
A fantastic film. Late 90s, perfect era of Brendan Fraser as an action hero. I actually just watched this a couple weeks ago with my family again. It never gets old.
I think that about wraps us up for this episode of Pop Culture Reference. If you want to reach the show, go ahead and tweet us at PCR_podcast or email us at popculturereferencepod@gmail.com. We also have a YouTube channel that we're going to just keep on plugging. In addition to our full-length podcast episodes, pretty soon we're going to be starting to do all kinds of new content that will be exclusively on YouTube. So make sure you're subscribed to us to get all of that sweet, sweet pop culture reference content.
That is a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening.